Our next speakers are Michael and Vince from Scaphold.io. They're the founders of Scaphold.io, and they're building a GraphQL Backend-as-a-Service.
Thanks. Awesome. Hey, I'm Michael. This is Vince, as I said. Thanks for having us. We're excited to talk. And yeah, we're the founders of Scaphold.io. We're building a GraphQL as a service platform. We actually just graduated from Y Combinator's fellowship class about a month ago. Thank you. But yeah, we're just going to get started. So why are we building a GraphQL as a service platform? We think it's timely. We think GraphQL is the future. The way that we kind of think about it is that GraphQL is to REST what REST was to SOAP back in like the 90s. And no one uses SOAP anymore, so that's kind of where we think things are going. This is kind of a simple litmus test we use, and this is the Google Trends chart for GraphQL, and it looks like straight like Slack. So we're real excited about GraphQL. Yeah, another thing. So who's building with GraphQL? As you heard, and I'm sure the Facebook guys can tell you better, they use it a lot. From our understanding, the story kind of goes that Facebook was running into a series of scaling problems where they had a ton of backend services and they had a ton of mobile apps, and it's really hard to get REST to scale across that many different things. So they kind of created this GraphQL language as a way to really seamlessly interact these disparate data sources into a single, consolidated, and standardized API. We also know that Twitter uses it. We've had a number of YC companies approach us about it. Intuit uses it, as you heard, Credit Karma, the New York Times, and just more and more. So we think it's going to become an even more important part in the industry. It's an important skill to learn. And if you're not building with it, it's a great time to start. So, and as you might have guessed, we use GraphQL a lot. Actually, a lot of our services that we use to manage our service are very similar to the services that we expose to you when you create an app. So we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. How's it work on our service? So one difference between us and the previous speakers is previously, when you know the structure of your API, it's really nice, and you can kind of encode that into GraphQL language and then kind of keep that stored as different modules on NPM and however it is, and import them as you want. We actually don't have that. Because we're kind of a generalist solution here, we let you structure your own GraphQL API, and we essentially generate your schema, and cache it, of course, in essentially what is a series of middleware. So it's kind of interesting. We kind of think of our GraphQL schema as a series of isomorphic middleware functions that flow unidirectionally. And we start with essentially a representation that we keep internally of the structure of your API. Essentially, it's a JSON encoding of your type system. And then we kind of, over time, as you add more and more features that we'll kind of get into in a demo later, we attack them on as iteratively as little pieces. Essentially, we're taking a GraphQL schema, augmenting it in some way, and then passing it forward down this pipeline of middleware. You'll see we have a permission system, a validation system, a series of resolvers. If you've experienced GraphQL, you know what those are. Talk to our models and hooks. Hooks allow us to do things like essentially bind events to certain things in your API, and then we have a series of data stores and services that we support. So we're just going to keep going. So the point of our service is we want it to make it really easy for you guys to build applications quickly and powerfully with GraphQL. So what does that mean? Modern applications, they use a lot of different cloud services to kind of avoid reinventing the wheel. In addition to a core data store, you're going to need something like payments. You could use Stripe or a Braintree. You're going to need some sort of social authentication or other social features. You're going to need notifications, and you're going to need messaging. The problem is that each of these services are written their own way in a different REST API. The Facebook REST API looks different than the Stripe REST API, looks different than the iOS API. And what we can do is actually really easily allow you to bind all of these different services as well as a hosted data store that we host kind of behind a GraphQL server and then build different applications against it. Part of our value prop is that we can let you do it in a matter of minutes instead of a matter of months. And we've actually really specialized in this and think we have a pretty good handle on how this GraphQL API works now. So we're going to go into a demo. Demos are bad, but we're going to do one anyway. So here's our portal. This is Scaphold.io. Essentially what you can see here is you have a number of apps. You can go on and make apps and for different purposes, and then you kind of go in and create an app, and the first thing you see is your schema designer. So this is essentially an interface that we created that allows it makes it really easy for you guys to create your schema, to structure the schema without actually having to worry about the nitty-gritty of writing JavaScript or anything else to get that schema to work. So kind of how you can see is, by default, we give you a user model. We allow you to do things like user authentication. We can tie in really easily to social auth providers and things like that for you. But you can also extend it. So feel free to extend it. So here's one that we use for one of our tutorials that we've written. Kind of a really basic schema with a message board and a user and a message. So you can see you can go in here, and if we wanted to add a new type, you can go in here, and we can add one, some type, click add, and then you get this. And in the background, we actually just allocated storage for you, and everything was set up to work really seamlessly. You can do the same thing for fields. If you're familiar with GraphQL, you're probably familiar with the concept of connections. So if you needed to, for example, say some type had a series of messages, then you can go in and denote that as a connection, say it's a message, and then this is kind of how you do the hierarchical structure. This is how you create the relations between the types in your schema. So that's kind of an example. So this is a tool that is really helpful, and a lot of our customers have been really excited about this tool because it really gets rid of a lot of the nitty-gritty when it comes to building GraphQL APIs quickly. So we'll keep going, delete that, and then kind of what you see here. So once you've defined your data model, that's step one, is figure out what are the types I need, how do they relate to each other, and kind of get that conceptual model at a high level. What is the data that you're going to need? Once you do that, you can actually start issuing queries. So we have a graphical tab. This is one that we built ourselves, not to discredit the real graphical. But yeah, you can go in here and start issuing queries. And let's see. Oh, I think it's downloading the schema right now. I don't have a ... It's coming, though. I think our internet is slow. Or not. Uh-oh. Where are you? OK. Well, it'll come back. We'll keep going. The other thing is, I should have cached this. Yeah. I think it's just being slow. Let's see. Sorry about that. OK. What's going on here? I think our internet is hurting here. Let's go back. Uh-oh. Classic technical demo. Not going as planned. Let's see if we have another one on board. This one working? There we go. Yeah. OK. OK, so another thing you can see here is, so in addition to your schema designer, where you define the structure of your API, you have a series of integrations. So these are things that we allow you to really seamlessly add these services to your API. So this one is actually the data set for our give Scaphold.io. So we, like Amazon has a smile.amazon.com, we have one that's give.scaphold.io. And it actually is a Angular 2 application built with Apollo client that uses Scaphold and our Stripe integration and our Mailgun integration to create a live charity site. So you can actually give money through that URL, and we will get it in our Stripe account, and we'll donate it to the charity of your choice that you pick in the URL, or on the website. We also have things like Twitter integration, iOS push, Stripe. Custom is actually a way to add webhooks with events to your API. So one example we did is we built a Pokemon Go clone using our location services and AWS Lambda. You can see a tutorial for that on our blog. And see how you can kind of really add your own functionality, your own server-side code using something like AWS Lambda or Google Functions. Algolia is a really powerful search tool. It's a service that does consumer search super well, and it actually integrates really seamlessly with our data sets, and we will automatically index your data and present it to you in a searchable fashion, which is really cool. Digits is a passwordless authentication toolchain. Auth0 is social auth, and Slack. So these are all ways to basically extend your GraphQL API with these really powerful service providers that already exist. In addition, we have an analytics portal and a number of other things that you can kind of poke around. One thing that I'll point to is our blog. We have a lot of tutorials on how to get started using not only just our service, but just GraphQL in addition to React and Relay, React Native, Angular 2, Apollo client, all kinds of things that you can feel free to take a look at if you are interested. So yeah, now we're going to go ahead. I'm going to hand it over to Vince, and he's going to show you some of the recent work we've been doing with real-time data.
Cool.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm going to go back here. I'll just show you guys the schema for Meshboard, as we call it again. It's basically just a messaging dashboarding app to demonstrate all the different things you could do with GraphQL subscriptions, as you guys might have heard. For those of you who haven't, GraphQL subscriptions is like a pub subsystem that allows you to do like real-time functionality. So you can do messaging, dashboarding, like real-time games, things like that, where you establish like a persistent TCP connection as opposed to normal like HTTP requests. So it's data coming from the server side, not just from the client side. So here's our schema for this app. There's a user model, and I broke down a couple of these, like, created at time so we can do aggregations on them. A message board that contains your messages. And so, yeah, it's a pretty simple schema here. And each one of these is typed, as you can see here, in this fashion. So what I will do is, so here is our GitHub. It's github.com/scaphold.io. And the most recent one we've published is the GraphQL subscription starter kit. So, I won't download this because I already have. But yeah, so basically Scaphold GraphQL meetup. All you have to do is just npm install, which I've already done, and then start it. So once this starts, this is just your quick and dirty way to get started. What happened? Uh-oh. Hold on. hold on. Okay. What's going on? Uh-oh. Yeah. But let me see. I think. Okay.
This is our lesson for trying to do a technical demo.
Cool. Yeah, so I think, I'm not sure. Yeah, so I have, okay. Yeah, I'll show them that. So the idea is like, I was going to show you like actually posting messages and stuff, but basically like this is a recording of like the app running. So I kind of just set up two different applications running side by side of the same instance. And then, it's just kind of like the Olympics. You can talk about it. And so here, you're sending a message and it shows up in both screens. So they're both like, when they log onto the page, you're kind of subscribed to your Scaphold API. And as soon as you do that, it'll start pushing changes down. So what actually happens is, there's queries, there's mutations, and subscriptions. And for subscriptions, the way we implemented it is with socket.io. That was just one that a lot of users saw, we're familiar with, so we decided to use that as our transfer protocol. And so what happens is once you issue a GraphQL subscription, it goes to our GraphQL server. We wrap that socket enclosure with a change feed that comes from our database. So we use Rethink database, which allows us to do a lot of the real-time functionality with their change feed functions. And so every single time a new change happens on the server, on the database, for instance, on the users, one of these numbers will pop up. And every time a new message comes up, one of these little dots will start moving up and down, as you might have seen in this GIF earlier. So just to show you a little bit about what the code looks like. So this is basically a subscription call. So it's basically using socket.io.
Get bigger.
Oh, sorry. Is that better? More. Okay, cool. So as soon as you log on, or as soon as you open the app, you establish a socket.io connection with your API key that we issue, and then your token for authentication. And then as soon as that happens, it connects and it subscribes to these users and the messages. So the way they're a little different. So every single type, the way we implemented it was every single type will have a subscription, so you can subscribe to users or messages. But what you can also do is you can filter on transaction types and also subfields. So you can listen on a specific chat room, for instance, or you can subscribe to just the creates or just the deletes. So depending on your use case, you can kind of tweak the filters and transaction types based on that. So that's kind of like our V1 of our implementation of subscriptions. We've been talking to Apollo about trying to implement other different protocols for this, for GraphQL subscriptions. So, or if you guys have any ideas, we're happy to hear them out as well. So yeah, that's kind of our short little demo of GraphQL, and also back to the starter kit page. This is our GitHub, so we have not only just GraphQL subscriptions, but also other little like playgrounds and test kits that we have that you can just get started with. And if you need anything else, feel free to also just message us. We have a Slack channel to provide suggestions. So back to the presentation. Uh-oh, what was it again? I think I might have closed it. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So yeah, we have our Scaphold.io blog for you to get started, resources to get started, as well as starter kits to help you get started. I know a lot of you guys are building React apps. We're actually currently in the process of rewriting our front end in React because it works really well with with GraphQL and Apollo. Thanks to you guys. So yeah, this is us. If you want to learn more, feel free to check us out. Starter kits, Slack, or ask us questions now. Thanks, guys.
All right, do we have any questions?
Good.
I'm curious about the subscriptions thing. Do you guys do any deduplication of the subscriptions across different users, right? Like if different users subscribe to the same stream of messages, does that result in like 2 different queries on the database, or is it somehow multiplexed into one? I'm just curious about the implementation.
Currently, there's a socket per subscription. So it doesn't currently do any duplication, but we're actually thinking of a lot of ways to enrich the subscription system that we've had, kind of like a V2 as well. So that would be part of that. Cool. No?
Not a technical question, but I'm really curious. How did you explain to investors GraphQL and what it's changing? I'm really curious.
So I guess we kind of just start out by saying we are one API for all your cloud services. We don't even start talking about GraphQL unless they're super technical. Because the benefit of GraphQL is not the brand or the name itself, but what it enables us to do, which is to be able to integrate with all these different cloud services, all your data across the web. So we start out by saying that, and that's the value prop, and then from there we talk about their interest is piqued, and then they ask how it's done, and then comes the idea of GraphQL and how that enables us to provide all these different services that used to not be possible about a year ago.
Yeah, and another piece of that is it's actually becoming easier. It's something that when we first started this project, we had to do a lot of fighting basically do a lot of education. We had to help people understand what this technology was. And I think something that's really cool is that the community of GraphQL is really growing, and people are really they're coming across GraphQL themselves, and then they come to us with questions. Instead of us being like, here's GraphQL, you should use it, it's more of the opposite direction. So that's something that's nice. The community is definitely growing, and people are coming to know it a lot more. Cool. Anything else? No?
If there are no more questions, then I have a question. So you quickly mentioned RethinkDB. Was that just for the subscriptions, or is that actually the database that powers your whole service? So
we're actually in the middle of a migration. We currently run most of our services on Rethink. We're moving it to have Rethink will be our event store, essentially. And then we're moving on to we're going to have SQL and a couple other stores as well that you will be able to use. So people actually choose which database is backing their, I guess, GraphQL model in that case? The goal, eventually, yeah. Sweet. All right, let's thank Michael and Vince again for their great talk.